Hello, welcome to the webinar titled Introduction to the Spiff PFS Strategic Plan Map. This is an on-demand learning event brought to you by Ohio's Spiff PFS initiative. My name is Holly Raffel, and I am your facilitator for today's learning event. We have 6 learning objectives for today, and they all center around the strategic plan map. We are really excited to orient you to these planning tools and get you started on your coalition's next phase of the Spiff. The question, how does outcomes-based planning translate to the Spiff, is a slide that we've been revisiting several times through our learning series. As you can see, when we move from problem statement, asking the question why, selecting intervening variables, asking the question why again, and learning about our local conditions, including community readiness, assessing those needs lead us to the selection of evidence-based strategies. The best part about the Spiff is that the evaluation is built right into the process because it is directly connected to the needs assessment. What we hope is that through the strategic prevention framework, by looking at building capacity, by looking at building sustainable community change in a culturally competent manner, that we can move the needle on substance abuse in our communities. Let's take a look at how we do that. The first step to strategic planning is creating a logic model. I'll ask the question, what is a logic model, and then pause so you can think about it and bring it back from your working memory. In Ohio, we discuss the logic model as being akin to the theory of change. If we do these strategies, we expect to get these outcomes. By having a strong theory of change, we know that we are using a data-driven planning process to select strategies that we know have a higher likelihood of working because they are directly related to the problem or issue that we are addressing in our community. Every theory of change needs some action behind it, and we call that the theory of action. A strategic plan helps us articulate that theory of action to others. The theory of action is a detailed visualization of how we're going to accomplish what we set out to do. It takes a look at our resources, our capacity, and what we are going to input to the process. It also details those activities associated with executing the strategies, so we know what is going to happen when. And finally, some outputs, and those are milestones that let us know that we are making progress on getting into the field with our intervention. How do a strategic plan and logic model work together? That's a good question. So I'll pause for a minute while you think about how the theory of change and the theory of action are working partners. Of course, together, a logic model and a strategic plan, or a theory of change and a theory of action, work together so they can articulate the path towards outcomes. The theory of change or logic model gives us the why. It lets us know why we're doing the particular strategies that we're doing. So we know that our strategies are connected to our overarching goal and they will lead to our expected outcomes. The theory of action breaks down the strategies and lets us know how we're going to get there. So it's really like we take that strategies box and we expand it. What are we putting in? What activities are we going to do? And what do we expect to get out? The theory of change is the why. The theory of action is the how. So how do we articulate this path towards outcomes? In Ohio, we call this the strategic plan map. The strategic plan map was co-developed by a group of individuals representing Ohio from a variety of prevention sectors. This was developed during Ohio's Spiff SIG initiative, which took place between 2009 and 2014. This strategic plan map is being used across many substance abuse prevention projects in Ohio, and it's been used successfully with both adult coalitions as well as youth-led prevention programs. And it's been a mainstay in the Spiff work in Ohio since 2009. The strategic plan map is an 11 by 17 piece of paper. It allows everyone to be on the same page, if you will, in this roadmap towards addressing the prevention issue that means the most to your community. So the question becomes, how do we complete the strategic plan map? That comes down to 4 steps. Articulate the logic chain, use that information to select a strategy, complete a strategy proposal form, and then transfer the information onto Ohio's Spiff PFS strategic plan map. This process is required for Ohio's Spiff PFS subrecipient grantees. However, because the materials were created by the prevention workforce, they could transfer well to the work that you're doing in other areas, not just this funded work. Step 1, articulate the logic chain. We have developed the Spiff PFS Logic Chain Quick Guide. This helps us take our data and put it into a format that helps us see what is needed in our community based upon the data, helps us select the strategy, and then helps us evaluate the strategy by matching up the data on the other side of the logic chain. There are 2 arrows on the slide in front of you. The first arrow details the logic chain in words. We start with the problem of practice. We ask that question, but why? And we come up with an intervening variable. We ask the question, but why again? And we come up with the local conditions. It's really important to keep asking that question, why, so we can pick the most appropriate evidence-based strategy. If we started with our problem of practice being, for example, underage drinking, we cannot select a strategy just yet. We have to know why underage drinking is a problem in our community. And if we go 2 layers of why, then we're getting closer to selecting that right strategy that we know is going to leverage change. Because if you come out on the other side, it says that if we implement an evidence-based strategy that has the desired impact on the local conditions, they will in turn impact our intervening variable, which will in turn impact our problem of practice. That is called articulating the Spiff PFS logic chain as a series of if-then statements. So starting from the first bullet, if we implement an evidence-informed strategy, then we can expect this outcome on our local conditions. If we get the outcome that we're looking for on our local conditions, then we can expect the outcome on our intervening variable. If we get the expected outcome on our intervening variable, it's then that we can expect a reduction in our problem of practice. We've been talking about underage drinking. The good news is that as a team, we've been preparing you for this throughout your needs assessment process. This shows how the Spiff truly is an interrelated process that leads you from needs assessment all the way to evaluation. If you think back to the listening sessions that you completed, you can see that we set you up to think about the outcome variable, the quantitative measures, as well as the root causes that you got from your listening session, those local contexts. And then we said, hey, hold off on strategies now, but we put that box in there as a reminder that there has to be this constant connection between the problem statement, the intervening variable, the root cause or local context, and the strategy. Everything has to fit. And that's why we call it an outcomes-based planning using a community logic model or a logic chain. This picture on this slide is something that we've been referring back to ever since the beginning of Ohio's Spiff PFS initiative. the problem statement, the intervening variable, the local conditions, including community readiness, evidence-based strategies, short-term outcome, and long-term outcomes. If everything's aligned in a row, then we can expect to have a high probability for success from our intervention. And you can see the logic chain quick guide flows from all of the materials that we have developed since the beginning of this project. So that should feel good to you as you look towards moving to the next step. Here is a slide, and we'll provide this for you as a tool that you can complete to think through some of those problems of practice and the influences on them and what you may or may not want to address in your community. The evidence-based strategies at this point we have grayed out. We don't want you to focus on strategies first. It's better to figure out what your logic chain is, to know exactly what it is you want to change in your community. That will help you better pick that evidence-based strategy that's culturally competent and sustainable. If you have done your work on the front end, you've set up your evaluation on the back end, then your community can spend the time and effort thinking through the strategies that are going to be most effective. A couple of notes on the logic chain worksheet. This logic chain worksheet has been designed as an intermediary step. It's a worksheet to show and share your coalition's work. It is an integral part of the strategic plan process, but you don't turn this into the evidence-based practices work group. The template is available on the Spiff PFS website for you to be able to complete. Step 2, selecting a strategy. Once you've set up your logic chain, it's time to think about selecting the appropriate strategy. Ohio's Evidence-Based Practices Work Group has created a position statement on the CSAP strategies. This position statement is posted on the Spiff PFS website. We're going to take a minute and go through this position statement here. Required element number 1 on the position statement is that every community coalition that's funded with Spiff PFS dollars must have a community-based process as a strategy. Right now, this is on hold. The reason why the EBP work group wanted communities to allocate funding to community-based process because community-based process is your coalition. The EBP work group is requiring that nurturing your coalition must be a strategy. This addresses sustainability, and it's true to the Spiff, and it's good news for you. The EBP work group does not want to see you allocate your entire budget on strategies other than community-based process. We know from past experience that sometimes grant-funded projects completely close down on the last day of the grant. We do not want that to happen for your coalition. The EBP is committed to have you expend funds on coalition maintenance and development. There's more information on this strategy to come, so don't worry. We will focus on this in state fiscal year 2019. Required element number 2. You must select either a prevention education or environmental strategy. This is consistent with the Ohio Moss Prevention Taxonomy. We know that there are only 2 of the 6 CSAP strategies that can work alone, and that's prevention education or environmental strategies. Therefore, Ohio's Spiff SIG coalitions must address either a prevention education or an environmental strategy with their initial submission to the Evidence-Based Practices Work Group. Required element number 3 is cultural competence. The EBP feels strongly that when selecting strategies, communities must consider the diversity of their priority population and ways to reduce participation in service disparities when they are selecting strategies. Again, this must be addressed with initial submission to the Evidence-Based Practices Work Group. It is part of the forms that coalitions are required to complete and submit, so there's no way that this can be missed in your submission. Required element number 4 has to do with problem identification and referral. So for all selected strategies, all SPIF PFS funded communities must also submit a plan for problem identification and referral for participants engaged in the strategy. It's expected that this plan have no associated expenses. Basically, what the EBP work group is saying is that every SPIF PFS funded coalition in Ohio should have some type of problem ID and referral plan. So you are touching your community with strategies. If you should identify in the process of implementing any of your strategies someone who goes beyond the scope of prevention, that your coalition has a way to identify there's an issue and make a referral to the appropriate agency in your community. It's important to have that warm handoff so that we are serving people where they are at on the continuum of care. Finally, the EBP work group made the decision that information and dissemination and alternative activities are important parts of comprehensive strategic plans. However, SPIF PFS funds may not be used to support these strategies. If your community is interested in utilizing information dissemination or alternative activities as part of your plan, that's a good idea. The EBP work group is fully supportive of that. However, they will not accept funding for SPIF PFS funds to be used for either of those strategies. So they're suggesting that you could have in-kind or match funds to support these strategies. So it could come from your operating budget, or it could be donations, or it could be other volunteers, or it could be public-private partnerships that you have in your community. So after you understand the EBP's position statement on the CSEP strategies, it is now time to complete a strategy proposal form. The EBP would like your coalition to submit one form for each strategy. The strategy proposal form has two parts. Part A has general information. You must complete it for each strategy. And Part B is strategy specific. And that's by CSEP strategy, and it must be, you need to ensure that you're completing the appropriate form, and they're all labeled at the top. The forms are available on the Spiff PFS website, and coalitions will submit the strategy proposal forms to the EBP along with the strategic plan map. So the strategic plan map isn't enough, not enough information. The strategy proposal form, what that does is is a little magnifying glass on your strategy and provides very detailed information for the EBP work group to review. After that is complete, we ask you to transfer applicable information on to the Spiff PFS strategic plan map. So we're revisiting the 11 by 17 map here. And we feel good about this map because all of these are elements that we have seen before. This particular slide is of an annotated version of the map. This map is available on the Spiff PFS website, so you can see exactly what should be in each box. There's also a Microsoft Word version of the strategic plan map on the Spiff PFS website. That is the information that you can go ahead and type in so that you have a permanent record of your plan. The Logic Chain Quick Guide really is a good intermediary tool. Elements from the Logic Chain Quick Guide map on directly to the strategic plan map. Let's take a look at how that happens. The first part, what is circled in red on this document, is the first part exactly of the strategic plan map. So you can see, really imagine the two arrows, one at the top and one at the bottom of the boxes. You have your problem of practice, intervening variable, and local conditions described in words, and then in the bottom boxes, you just submit your data. On the right-hand side is the evaluation component, or the outcomes that you're expecting, and that is exactly the same on the strategic plan map. You're just transferring information from the Logic Chain Quick Guide right onto your strategic plan map. The if-then statements that you create at the bottom of your Logic Chain Quick Guide simply get entered into your map up at the top, your theory of change. The strategic plan map is that combination of theory of change and theory of action. The theory of action, you provide a brief overview, sort of like the crib notes or cliff notes, and then you fill out the appropriate strategy proposal forms to give us a little bit more detail. So for every strategic plan map you submit, you will have strategy proposal forms that go along with the theory of action. Your coalition will submit one strategic plan map for each intervening variable addressed. Each map allows space for 2 strategies to address a single intervening variable. You do not need 2 strategies. If you only have 1 strategy, that is okay. You can just delete the lines for the second strategy. The important takeaway here is that each strategic plan map can only have 1 intervening variable. If your community or coalition is addressing 2 intervening variables, you will submit 2 strategic plan maps. Forms are available on the Spiff PFS website, and do not forget, the strategic plan in Ohio has 2 parts, the strategic plan map and the strategy proposal forms. So resources that we have for you. The Spiff SIG has forms for has strategic plan maps and strategy proposal forms on there. You can go through Ohio's 13 Spiff counties, select a county, and look for the logic model and strategic plan tabs, and you can see a lot of examples of completed strategic plan maps as well as strategy proposal forms. The Spiff PFS website also has forms and videos on it. Finally, if you're a funded community, you can ask your OCAM coach and OSET evaluator for support. There is no wrong door. We are all here as our communities finalize their strategic plans. Some key due dates for Ohio Strategic Plan Map. You'll submit your draft strategic plan maps, not including community-based process, to OSET by May 25th. At our June face-to-face learning community, there'll be some peer sharing. And then our final strategic plan maps, again, not including the community-based process, are due to the EBP workgroup for review on June 15th. The EBP will be reviewing the plans on June 22nd, and we'll have the plans approved by June 30th. Thank you very much for your time and for reviewing this webinar. As always, your primary resource for all things Spiff PFS is our website at pfs.ohio.gov.